Hello everybody, this is Steven again, and in this video I wanted to show how I can take this walk cycle animation that I've been working on and actually put it into a scrolling background. And what I mean by that is I want the character to be standing still, just like he is. He's in the middle of the scene, he's walking along, but I want to make it look like he's walking through an environment. So I've created a scene here that has a scrolling background, and I wanted to talk about a couple things that I do to set this up. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is if you're going to do a scrolling background, the background is separated into multiple layers. So I've got a foreground, a middle ground, which is my mountains, and then I actually have clouds, the ground, and a sky. And the reason this is layered like this is the foreground is going to be the one that's closest to the camera or the viewer. The midground is the one just beyond that. The clouds are really just the background that are going to be moving as well. So I've got clouds here, and you'll notice that a lot of these elements are off the side of the screen. So if I click this little button right here, it clips the content. And this is what I'm going to see when I finally render out or when I export out this as a movie file or an animated GIF or whatever, however I'm going to export this. So I'm going to unclip that. And then I'll kind of talk about a couple things that I've set up. So I have a sky in the background. I just drew out a rectangle and filled the scene with it. I made it exactly the size of the scene because I don't need the sky itself to move, but I need it to be behind everything. And then the ground itself is going to be in front of that. And the reason I want the ground down here is any other elements that are above it are going to be on top of it. And then the clouds, I mean, I could swap that out, but I felt like this was a good place for the clouds to go. The midground and the foreground. And you'll notice when I select the foreground that I have a couple different symbols created. And I just wanted to talk about a couple tools that I use to create this. I really like using this new fluid brush that's with Adobe Animate 2020. And this is how I created these mountains. All I did was I took the brush. I'm going to hide these. And I'll hide that's the midground, so that's the one I'm going to be working on. I can lock that or hide it or whatever, but I'm going to be working on this one. And so I just want to kind of show an example of how I use this. So I'm just going to sample the color of this foreground here, or sort of the mountains that are in front. And the idea is as mountains fade off into the distance, they get lighter and lighter and lighter. It's actually clouds. It's actually like fog or particles in the air that kind of obscure that and kind of cut out the light. So the closer and closer the mountains are, I want to do that. So in this regard, when I scroll these, I could scroll them separately, but I'm going to scroll them together just to kind of give an example. So I'm going to use the fluid brush, but I'm going to go to the color picker, and I'm actually choosing this particular color picker. So when you go to the color, I can choose out of one of these swatches, or I could just go to the picker itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a darker color because I want it to be kind of in front of these mountains. So I'm just going to kind of paint with this fluid brush. And you'll notice I tried to follow as well as I could these contours, right? And I try not to draw over them too much. I just try to make a single stroke. Now, if you don't have any lines interrupted, if I take these lines and go off the page and make sure that it, separates from the previous color, then I can take this paint bucket tool with the same color and I can fill these areas, right? And it's just kind of filling those areas there. So now I made another layer if I wanted to do that. So I'm going to leave that. That's how I created these mountains. I did something similar with the clouds, is I just actually used an oval and made it white and then started using the fluid brush on top of it. So that's how I created the clouds. So you can create it in whatever way that you wish. You can also, I can come down here and, sort of erase down here, if I wanted kind of a clean line. And I don't really care about it being a super clean line because I'm going to obscure it a little bit. So I'm going to lock that and show this. And here's how I created the trees and the grass, and I'll show you my process for this. So I have this grass over here that I don't have as a symbol. I just drew them straight out onto this foreground layer. These I converted to symbols. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select those, right click, and then go down to convert to symbol. And I'm going to call this grass. And I believe now I'm up to grass number 4. So I'm just going to go grass 4, and I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I can move that around, and I can take a variety of these and just drag them out, and make, sort of grass that's in front. I don't need to, keep on my number scheme, and I can also kind of move these around. So I'm going to get a little closer. And if I really wanted to get, I double clicked on it and you can edit it in place. If I want to get, really crazy with it, I could start animating, these as well, have them animated, moving or whatever when the character's walking. But I don't necessarily need to do that. Right, so I've just kind of created a bunch of different grass here that I can kind of move around. I like this one. And I need to make sure that I'm going to pull those, off to the side. Keep it going. Right, now, eventually my background, or my middle ground is what I'm calling these mountains, they're going to be converted to a symbol, but I'm going to do that when I do a motion tween. Now I can add a couple different pieces of grass, or, kind of keep it going, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit and how I, extend it beyond the point where it repeats or whatever. The same thing, I did the same thing pretty much with the trees. I started with one tree and a symbol. I created a tree, and then I created another tree, and I actually just kind of used some of the same elements. And I just use the fluid brush and whatever variety of tools that I need to on that. I'm going to go back to the scrolling background. So I'm at the point where I can start animating it, but I really want the character to be in there first. And what's going to happen is the character is going to be in the middle of the scene, and everything's going to kind of go by him. So what I did originally when I created this walk cycle, let me play it through, and I have it kind of working here pretty well. So I created it on the main timeline in one of the scenes. Now I can't necessarily reuse that. I need to make it a symbol. And this is how I'm going to create that. I'm just going to select, I'm going to pull this up. There we go. And I'm going to select all these. I don't need the floor though. I'm going to select all these layers. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to copy layers. Right. Then I just need to dock this back down, because I don't necessarily need it undocked. But now that I've copied all those, this is the library with all the symbols that I have, and I just need to make a new one. I'm going to go down here to the bottom and I'm going to go new symbol. And in this symbol, I want to make sure it's a graphic. I do not want a movie clip. A movie clip has its own timeline, the same as a graphic, but a movie clip has to be triggered by code, like a little snippet of code to trigger it, which is a really cool thing, but I just want the walk cycle to continue walking. So I'm going to go to graphic, and a graphic will have its own timeline, but it'll be synchronized with the main timeline, which is what I want. I want it to keep repeating. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call that walk cycle. Click OK. And in that walk cycle, I'm going to right click over the symbol and I'm going to paste layers. And the layers that I pasted from the character walking are now in this symbol. Now the only problem with that sometimes is things can get disconnected. Right? You can see right here my arms got disconnected from this upper arm, right? Everything else works. I'm going to get that framed up. Whoop, right there. That's pretty good. And let's play it through and see what it does. Okay, everything seems to be working except for that arm, and it happens sometimes. So with everything parented, this is kind of what's happening. So this left hand, the arms got disconnected. So what I need to do is make sure that these are all connected again. So click play. So I need the leg connected to the body. I need the right arm connected to the body. I need the head connected to the body. I need the left arm connected to the body. I need the left hand connected to the lower arm. I need the lower arm connected to the upper arm, and I need the upper arm connected to the body. Now, if that still didn't fix these, now everything else should be working pretty well. But if that didn't fix these, I need to actually separate these. So I'm going to go to the lower arm and the hand and disconnect them. Whoop. Let me remove parent and remove parent and turn that back on. Whoop. There we go. And now I'm going to go to the very first frame. I'm going to take that lower arm and I'm going to put it back where it's supposed to be. With it in position now, I'm going to right click on that layer. I'm going to clear keyframe and then just go to position because I don't need the position information at all. What I need is the rotation because these are just rotating. Now, if you did have it moving for whatever reason, it could have a problem because it's going to look broken. So you'd have to kind of fix that up. But in this case, I just have them rotating, especially if this is a character. And I'm going to go now to its left hand, the character's left hand. And I'm going to move it down over here where it should be. And I'm going to just kind of make sure that it's in the right spot. And again, I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to clear keyframe and just position because position is just translation. I'm just going to move it back where it should be. Oh, it did it again. Oh, because I was off. I need to be right on frame 1. Okay, so if I'm on frame 1, now I need to parent them. So the lower hand needs to be parented to the lower arm, and the lower arm needs to be parented to the upper arm. And now when I kind of back out of this a little bit, looks like the head might need to be fixed a little bit too. And now I've got the character moving. And I'll just leave the head seems like it's okay. It's just a little bit high, I think. But I could adjust that later if I need to. But now all this is within a symbol. I have it on a walk cycle symbol. Let me play that through. And maybe I have a little bit too much. I think it actually kind of works like that. So I'm going to loop that just to kind of show it. Yeah, there's a little hiccup in the arm there. And so I can go ahead and fix that if I need to. Right. So I'm going to go to my first frame of the lower arm. Let's go to the last frame. Yep, that's what's doing it. So I think I'm just going to use this one, scale it up a little bit, go to the lower arm, and I'm just going to option drag that one over to here to duplicate that frame. Now the same thing here, you notice it shifts when I select that, so I'm going to option drag over here. And I'm going to do the same thing with these arms. Just option drag all those over and it duplicates them. So now when I click here and click here, I've got one more. Let me fix that one. I'm going to option drag from there. So it just duplicates that. So now if I click it, there's no movement, which is what I want. So now that's going to loop. It keeps just looping, right? So now I'm going to go back to my main scene, and I'm going to go to, I have this one called scrolling backgrounds. Now when I get back to this scene, I need to make a new layer for the walk cycle for this character. So I'm just going to click there and put in walk cycle. And it just says special characters because I put a space and it put an underscore, which is fine. I'm going to drag that walk cycle right over to this. And the first thing you're going to notice is the character is pretty big for the scene. So all I'm going to do is hold down shift. And this is the nice thing about having it in a symbol. I just hold down shift and using the free transform tool, I scale that character down. Right? I'm using shift to make sure that it's constraining. And now he looks a little bit more appropriate for the environment. Right? So I'm going to kind of set him right there in the middle. And I'm going to fit that to window. Now, if I clip it, you can see the character is kind of going to be walking through the scene. Now, once I play it, and I'm going to turn off looping, and I'm going to scale this down, and I've set this up so it'll go 150 frames. So this character is going to keep walking, and if I play it, notice how the character just keeps walking because it's in this walk cycle loop, and it just keeps looping until we run out of time on the main timeline. So even though the walk cycle is 25 frames, my main timeline is 150, and it's just going to keep looping until it gets to the very end. So it gets to frame 25, and the walk cycle repeats, and it goes to 50, and then it repeats. So that's kind of the idea of this character walking through this environment. So you'll notice when I do that, nothing's moving. It doesn't look like it's walking through the environment because we haven't animated any of this. So I'm going to take my foreground first. And that's all the elements with the trees and the grass. And I can add another tree in there if I wanted to. Let's do that. And now I'm going to take that layer, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to convert to a motion tween. I'm going to get this pop-up window saying I've got multiple objects selected. They must be converted to a symbol to tween them. And that's okay. They're symbols, and then it's going to create another symbol, and it's going to put those inside. So now if I look at the symbol, you're going to see that I've got the trees and the grass, and all those symbols are inside of that symbol. So now I've got these set up as a motion tween. I'm just going to go to the very end, and I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to move it across the scene. Right? And now I don't want to go beyond the point where it disappears, right? So if I do that, it looks like he's walking too fast for the environment. So what I want to do is I want to adjust this a little bit to make sure that I'm getting kind of the right pace, right? And it's not going to be synchronized completely, but I just kind of keep making sure that as the character is walking, it looks like he's walking through this environment. Now, technically, what you would want to do, depending on how much you want to put into this animation, you could go to the point where he steps, because his pace is going to be slow and fast and slow and fast and slow and fast. So technically, I could go into here wherever he's going slower. If you see the foot sliding like that, I can animate from that point to that point. I could kind of grab this and move it just a little bit, and then find out where he steps and to where the next contact is, and I can move it back a little bit to readjust it, right? Or maybe I need to move it forward a little bit. So it really depends on the pace of the character. Now you can see he's sort of sliding along that, right? So now it looks like he's walking through the environment. But the problem is when we get to here, it ends, right? So what I could do to simplify things, all I'm going to do is open this symbol, and I'm going to put in a couple more trees and some more grass so that it looks like it keeps going. I find this to be a little bit easier. So I'm going to go to grass 4, than having to kind of adjust things and, kind of add a background again to get it to move a little bit more. I'm going to put this one over here. Let me move this over. Right. I'm going to back out a little bit. Oh, let me go to just the selection tool. I can kind of adjust these. Whoop, I double clicked on it. And let's put grass 4 here. Let's put a grass 1 right there. All right. Now I'm going to go back to here. And now let's see if that completes. Yeah. And I even have a lot more than I really needed, but at least now it looks like the character's walking through this foreground. And maybe the speed needs to be adjusted. So let's grab this and move it a little bit more. It's pretty good. So I'm going to play the whole thing through, even with my little speed adjustment. Right. And maybe it needs to move just a little bit more. There. I think that's pretty good. At least it looks pretty good. Now that I have the foreground, now I'm going to go to the middle ground. So I'm going to lock that one. I'm going to go to the middle ground and again go to create motion tween. It's going to say it needs to be a symbol. I convert it to a symbol. I'm going to go to the very end. I'm going to take this, and it's going to not move at the same rate. So I'm just going to move it just a little bit because it's further out in the distance, and now it looks like you've got that parallax going on, right? And if I really wanted to go for it, I would separate each one of the mountain ranges into a different layer and animate them separately. I would do a motion tween on those separately. But you can see it's not moving at the same rate as the character or the foreground. Right? So it looks like it's far in the distance and he's moving. Now the last one I'm going to do is the clouds. So I'm going to come up here, right click, create motion tween. It needs to be converted to a symbol. Click OK. Go to the very end. And I'm just going to move this a little bit. And now let's see how that all works. And now I'm going to clip it. And let's make that fit into the window. And now I'm going to go ahead and play it through. And now I have this parallax with my character walking through my scene. And that's the basics of putting together some backgrounds, getting a character to walk as it's kind of translating, going through the scene. The character is just standing still and walking in place in the middle, but because I have the background moving, it looks like he's walking through an environment, and a very diverse environment. You know, I've got grass, I've got trees, I've got mountains moving, and I've got clouds moving in the background. And again, the clouds are not moving at the same rate as the background, or sorry, the midground or the foreground. Whatever's closer to the camera is going to move faster. Whatever is further away from the camera is going to move slower. So in the way this looks, the clouds would be, you know, pretty far out in the distance, or maybe they're somewhat in between where the mountain range and the foreground is. So hopefully that helps, and good luck, and enjoy animating.